Congressman, always good to see you. Thanks for being back with us.
Thanks for having me on today, Sean.
So obviously, the big news last week was the House finally passed fiscal 24 spending that started in October of last year. I mean, we're already dealing with fiscal year 25. We wrapped up 24. You were not happy about it, I think is fair to say. And afterwards said, maybe we need a new speaker. Walk me through what your thinking is, where we are now, and where you see the way forward is.
Yeah, thank you for letting me explain. First of all, I want to say I support our Republican majority. It's extremely important to me. As a matter of fact, I support our majority so much. I'm one of the few members of Congress that has paid all of my dues to the NRCC and then hundreds of thousands of dollars more than that.
Can you just stop for 1 second? Explain. That is such a, I apologize for interrupting, but what does that mean? How many members of the conference do what you do? Because this has been a sore subject for a lot of members. I want you just to explain to viewers what that means, what you just said.
So what that means is every single Congress, each Republican member of Congress has to pay their dues to the NRCC. And when we pay our dues to the NRCC, that helps us fight. That helps us fight every single battle against the Democrats. It supports Republicans getting reelected. It helps support us win the majority for next Congress. And so it's extremely important for all of us to pay into the NRCC to basically be able to win. And winning is so important because that gives us the speaker's gavel. That gives us control over every single committee in the House. That gives us subpoena power. And that gives us the ability to govern at the federal level in the House of Representatives. Very few members of Congress, very few Republicans pay their full dues. It can take the entire Congress to pay them, as they raise money and then ask donors to help support them in order to pay their dues. I am one of the few Republican members of Congress. I have paid all my dues. I paid it at the beginning of this Congress because I was so excited for us to hold the Republican majority. And because I believe in our majority so much, I am supporting our full conference to hold the majority again next Congress when hopefully we have President Trump in the White House.
Okay, so that's important context. The NRCC is the campaign arm. You pay in, which, as you point out, that's why I wanted to make sure you explain this. A lot of the members talk about the importance of majority, but don't maybe pay their dues to the NRCC, which helps grow the majority and maintain the majority and helps the more vulnerable members to their campaigns. So I want you to continue, please. What you just laid the context out. We passed this bill. You expressed concern. Why does all that matter?
It matters because our bills that we pass are our actions, and our actions are more important to Republican voters and our country as a whole than our words. And for decades, Republicans have campaigned and made promises to the American people, promises to the Republican voters, and promises to their district that they never follow through with actions. And everyone has watched our majority, this Congress, basically fall apart and fight with one another. And I have wanted so much for our Congress, our majority, to deliver on the promises that we made to America when we took this Congress. We promised that we would pass single appropriation bills. We promised that we would follow regular order, meaning that we would have 72 hours to read thousands of pages that are in bills that we have to vote on. We promised that we would not bring big government spending bills under suspension, which actually suspends all the rules. We promised the American people to be completely transparent. All of that has fallen apart. America watched all of us go through a great battle with one another after Speaker McCarthy was ousted by 8 Republicans that joined the Democrats to vote him out. That happened after Kevin McCarthy passed a CR, which continued government funding. We elected Mike Johnson at the end of October. Since Mike Johnson has become Speaker, he has passed 3 CRs, Sean. He had all of November, December, January, and February. He had 4 months to finish the appropriations process that we were mostly through with. Kevin McCarthy had passed 7 appropriation bills. We only had 5 more to do, and we could have done them in single appropriation bills. But Mike Johnson waited all the way until Friday, which was the government funding deadline. and forced us, the Republican conference, to vote on the second half of an omnibus. It was 6 appropriation bills packaged into one, after only giving us one day to read the bill that was 1,012 pages. But the worst part that I think is the most egregious is he passed it under suspension and did not allow us, the Republican majority, to vote on any amendments to make changes to this Chuck Schumer Democrat-led government funding omnibus. It was a complete failure. It was basically an attack on our own conference. So he forced, think about this. This is what people need to understand. Republicans, all of us, were forced to choose, do we want to pay our military soldiers, or do we want to stay with our moral and very important social issues like no funding for abortion? This bill contained funding for abortion clinics that provide abortions up to full term. And that is laid out in many of the outlines the summaries that have come out of this bill. This bill contained funding for the trans agenda against children. It contained funding for DEI. It contained funding for the FBI's brand new headquarters after the FBI has raided Mar-a-Lago and targeted many Americans. It contained full funding for the Department of Justice that's been weaponized against President Trump, pro-lifers, parents that were trying to hold their school boards accountable. This was full funding for Joe Biden's wide open border policies. And this happened when the video was on loop of illegal aliens, military-age men running over Texas National Guard and the Border Patrol agents. And he didn't allow us to vote on any amendments to make changes to this bill, to add in the Laken-Riley Act, to try to add in parts of HR 2, to try to make any changes, to take out abortion funding. And so our conference, and you have to understand this, Mike Johnson, his responsibility is the care of our conference. It's to help us get reelected. He totally violated that by forcing our conference to simply choose yes or no on this bill intact as it stood without making any changes. He forced Republicans to walk the plank for him, but it was really walking the plank for Chuck Schumer and the Biden administration. And that's why I filed the motion to vacate.
For those that say, well, Johnson was jammed on this because the Senate wasn't going to go along with anything and the president wasn't going to sign anything, what's the response there?
The response is easy. After Johnson passed the bill on the House floor, the bill went to the Senate on Friday. And we watched the Senate debate the bill. And let me tell you something. Mike Johnson did not allow us to have amendments. Chuck Schumer allowed his senators to have amendments. And then they went to war. That's right. Then they went to war in the Senate as Republican senators were fighting to put the Laken-Riley Act into the bill. Republican senators were fighting to put measures of HR 2, border security measures, into the bill. Republican senators fought to pull out the abortion funding. They fought to do the many good things that we were denied the ability to do in the House by Mike Johnson. Republicans in the Senate were allowed to do it under Chuck Schumer, but Chuck Schumer knew he had the upper hand. He knew they would lose, so he allowed them to do it. But let me tell you what happened, Sean. They shut down the government because they didn't get it passed before midnight. Democrat senators and Chuck Schumer were so invested to keep that bill intact, just as it was, just as Mike Johnson's Senate. They went into the early hours of the morning on Saturday, which essentially was a government shutdown. So Democrats proved they don't care about a government shutdown. They care about getting their agenda passed and getting their way. And they were willing to shut down the government, even if it was for a few hours, in order to make it happen.